I'm Tom Osman, and this is Whatever Comes Next, the podcast where I explore the world of underground and independent music making. And on today's episode, I am joined by Alexander Moskos, Chloë Lum, and Yannick Desranleau. I'm pretty sure I've mispronounced that, so I apologize. Who were, at the time that they in fact split up back in 2012, the final iteration of Montreal, Quebec's AIDS Wolf. And why are we talking? Well, the reason we are talking is because the trio have some old new music to promote in the form of the 4-track EP Harsh Human Style, which in fact comprises the final 4 tracks that the trio ever recorded together as AIDS Wolf back in 2012 after they played their final shows together. And for various reasons that we will discuss in this interview, the tracks remained unfinished in terms of the mixing for the next 14 years until finally this year they were completed, and they are now being made available thanks to SKiN GRAFT Records, who worked with the band for quite some time back when they were active. The EP will be out on the 6th of March, in fact, this coming Friday. And this was, if I do say so myself, although I give full credit to the band, a really great conversation. It was great to have the 3 of them all together. It was very interesting to get their stories about the band's history, various different insights about different recordings, about their live experience. We talk a bit about the whole mechanics of touring and trying to make a living as a noisy avant-garde punk band in North America at the time that they were active together. We talk about what they've been doing since the band split up. We talk about the avant-garde in general. Lots of interesting topics that we discuss together. Now, there is one little disclaimer I have to make. Unfortunately, just prior to this interview, I discovered that my interface had died. And so cue 10 or 20 minutes of me frantically scrabbling around, trying to get it to work, realizing it wasn't going to work, and deciding, right, what am I going to do? I'm just going to record this interview through my computer. So you will discover once this interview starts that the sound quality is suboptimal, and I do apologize for that, but I did the best that I could. So please forgive the slightly shonky sound. I hope you will enjoy the content. You can get hold of Harsh Human Style, or you will be able to get hold of Harsh Human Style from Bandcamp through SKiN GRAFT. The first track, 68, is currently streaming, and I will play that at the end of this interview with a little clip coming right up. You can follow me at Tom Osman Sounds. You can go to my website, tomosmansounds.com, to see my music and my writings about my music there. You can go to Ampwall for my music. You can go to Bandcamp. And aside from that, I think there is nothing left to be said, but Yannick, Chloë, and Alexander of AIDS Wolf. Take it away. When was the last time that the 3 of you were in a room together?
Pretty recently.
In the fall?
Virtually, quite recently. But yeah, no, you guys came through we sat outside, so it wasn't winter yet.
We had dinner in Chinatown in Montreal. Yeah.
But we've remained close friends throughout since the band. And, Chloë and I have known each other since we were teenagers, so.
Yeah,
we keep
Alex
in touch.
and I have known each other for I think 36 years at this point. So we've been friends long before and long after the band.
Mm-hmm.
Okay. And so, Alex, when was it exactly that you actually joined the band?
2008.
Okay.
For the Cities of Glass US tour.
Yeah.
Okay. So were you on Cities of Glass, or it was when you were touring?
No, Andre Garrett plays guitar on that.
Okay.
So I learned all his parts.
And how straightforward or otherwise was that for you?
In some cases, quite straightforward. Some of it was very difficult. There were some tunes that I couldn't grasp that sort of fell off the set lists. But yeah, Andre made a DVD, an instructional DVD that presented the approach and all of the songs, so you could just follow his hands on your fretboard.
And so for me, from the outside, if I go back to your first album, Chloë and Yannick, The Lovers, I feel like somehow that album is more kind of, well, it's not mainstream in any way, but it feels more kind of digestible than Cities of Glass. Like it feels like in Cities of Glass, you went, okay, we're going to push this to a further extreme. Was that sort of an intentional move, or was that just organically what happened with the music?
Oh God. I mean, I think the recording on the Lovers LP was limited by our means. If it came out the way it came out, that's kind of off how far we could push it. I mean, like literally we recorded that in our practice space, and Arlen recorded it, like basically did it for free. And like the sound that you have, it's everything sounds really separated. It's just because the practice space is really kind of padded. And
He's
like,
talking about the songs
oh,
themselves.
the songs themselves, because like there's like I find that like the quality of the recording gives a wrong impression of how the songs were written. Because like when we came to Cities of Glass, record the recording studio, we recorded it in was it Oakland or San Francisco? And it was in the Bay
Oakland.
Area, Oakland. Like we had much more room around the band. Like the band sounded much more live, and you know, it was like a real kind of recording studio situation, and that's kind of how we got this like really harsh, really kind of live sound. But like the songs themselves, like, you know, like there's a kind of a continuation between the two, because half the songs on Cities of Glass were written with Chris in the band, who was on the Lovers LP, who then got replaced by Miles, who's the person who's playing uh, his his side of the guitar on Cities of Glass. And like when Miles came in, the compositions became a little bit more, I guess, complicated, no, proggy, maybe more than like what Chris was writing with us.
Yeah,
Yeah.
me and Yannick, we've always had like an interest in the tension between like things that are like more punk and then things that are more avant-garde. And I think like Cities of Glass, not the Lovers, definitely like had more of the punk side than any of the other subsequent recordings.
Yeah.
But like when Miles came in, like his antecedents had always been in like kind of more proggy math rock type bands, and he brought that with him, and we just kind of, you know, I don't think it was ever a conscious thing. It was just like we and the different people we played with like were coming with like a pretty diverse set of interests, and those would pop in and out as the band went.
But like I know that during the mix for Cities of Glass, like because I was the person who was overseeing that, like there was I was like really kind of trying to push kind of the harshness in the band that like the recording on the Lovers LP didn't fully capture. And so it kind of gives this impression, but like I find there's a lot of overlap between the two, like knowing how the compositions came about.
I
Like
mean, even some of the compositions were written at the same time.
Around the same time, yeah. Like on the Lovers LP, the first song was actually the last one we recorded during that session. It was the newest song, and that song, "Spit Tastes Like Metal," I think, could have been on Cities of Glass.
Yeah, I think being in a real studio, and like having like a bit of sound isolation just allowed for like way more control of the end result. And
think
I mean, I'm
also
sure having Weasel producing uh helped that bring
in
the harshness out.
I think too, just you guys were playing more, and it was just a more refined
Yeah,
product
like
at
we
that point.
recorded that like halfway through like a 6-week tour.
And I mean,
Yeah.
also like you guys, Yannick played drums out of necessity, if I remember correctly. You couldn't find a drummer in the city that had the interest and the willingness to play that hard. So Yannick just said, "Oh, I guess I'll do this." You're not a naturally, I mean, you're a great drummer, but it's not like you'd spent years playing the drums. You just kind of like picked it up.
Yeah, well, I mean, the writing of the drumming was kind of, yeah, adapted to
But by the
these skills.
time Cities of Glass came around, you were
Yeah,
probably much more proficient at it than you
yeah,
were. And it was probably a little more complex sounding because of that.
yeah.
I would say like there's a sense with AIDS Wolf that, and even just with the name itself, there's always a sense of confrontation or being confrontational with the band. But I wonder how much of that was really like intentionally trying to aggravate certain people versus like just you were doing what you wanted to do, and if people were aggravated, that was just a byproduct of it.
That's interesting because, like, I don't think any of us, that was in our intention to do the right music that was either aggravating or provoking. Like, we all in this band, like, had an affinity towards the avant-garde, like things that either sounded weird or new, and like, I guess like abrasiveness is often part of that vocabulary. And like also our goal was to find like-minded people whose brains are turned on by this kind of like stimuli musically.
Yeah.
Yeah, so that's like super important for us. And like we ended up writing, well, our influences is feeded in what we were writing. And like we no, rather it's like the idea of the music was more one that was meant to, I mean, I know it sounds weird, maybe to an outside listener, but we rather like we're looking for like-minded people. We tried to do something that was like progressive and open, but like, it ends up being really harsh and weird because I guess that's kind of how we are in terms of personalities. I don't know. I
I
don't know
think
if
that
Chloe has a take on that. Yeah.
most people that couldn't handle it left the room
Yeah.
right away. I mean, that's always the case with this kind of music. And no one, so, you're left with people that can take it. And the confrontational attitude, I mean, you got to understand there was a cultural trend at the time for just a confrontation within the music, but also aggressive audiences. You got a lot of audiences that, really wanted to get on stage, really wanted to move, really wanted to feel their bodies, really wanted to feel other people's bodies. So it was quite intense, and I never experienced it too much, but Andre, who preceded me, definitely had stories of having to push kids off the stage because they were basically up there, in his face, right? So there's that aspect of it too. It's very early 2000s. North American underground music scene was just like that.
Like a lot of bands were playing, straight on the floor, so were we. Like
Playing on
there's
the
like
floor was
necessity of kind of communicating directly with the
common thing.
audience it was super important. Because like the cathartic aspect of the performance, like, like was directly linked with the kind of music we were playing. And like for us, like, yeah, like it was important to communicate in that way with other musicians we're touring with or playing with, or like the people who were attending our shows.
Mhm.
And like, yeah, that, and the musical language is kind of reflecting, I guess, that need, maybe physical, psychological need. Maslow's pyramid.
For me, the interest was always just to be the kind of bands that I would want to listen to or go see. Like I never had any interest in provoking people who might not like it. I don't care about people who don't like it. Like they're free to not like it. And you know, being a small underground band, it's not like anybody who didn't like it was really forced to listen to it. Like Alex said, if people were at a show, they and they didn't like it, they usually just left. And we had that experience. So we weren't playing for the people who left, we were playing for the people who stayed.
Yeah. Well, like, you know, I mean, in terms of the name then, like I've interviewed members of Cunts, for example, who were originally CUNTS. And then after a while, I was talking to Matt Kronk, the singer, and he said that they realized they were getting shadow banned online. So they changed the name to CNTS because they decided like, we're just sort of like shooting ourselves in the foot. And I interviewed one of the members of Fuck Money. I don't know if you're familiar with them. And they talked as well about having issues because of the name. So I don't know for you, because you were operating in a very underground level, did you ever feel like being called AIDS Wolf was something that, like I'm sure, you know, like within the mainstream world, some people would go like, oh, what a horrible name. But did that ever like create any issues for you? Or, you know, in the underground, it was just like, whatever, this is just what the name is.
No, we definitely experienced some pushback and like pretty strong criticism. I'm not sure the criticism was entirely unfair, but I wouldn't say it was entirely fair either. I take responsibility for the name. Me and Yannick and our really good friend Mark McLean, who was in the band The Sick Lipstick at the time, we were watching other friends in a band called An Albatross perform in a backyard as like an after party for a music festival in Columbus, Ohio. And AIDS Wolf was spray painted on the side of the house. And it basically, like we had a band, Yannick and I had a band before. We had just split up because our bandmate moved to Korea to teach English. And our friends were joking like, this should be your next band. And we were like, yeah, sure, it'll be our next band. You know, at the time, the bands that we had been very much like local bands, like playing, you know, in Montreal, maybe Toronto, Ottawa, like very kind of small time local bands just in that region of Canada. And when we decided to call our new band AIDS Wolf, we never imagined that the band was going to be around for 10 years. We never imagined that the band was going to have like real record labels putting our stuff out, or that we were going to really have an audience outside of like a very small local community. You know, in hindsight, I don't think I would have chosen that band name. And I think it, you know, it definitely alienated some people who might have been on our side. Like we were told that people saw it as very cavalier, as taking the AIDS crisis lightly, which was never our intent. For me, it was that the combination of words seemed really absurd and dadaistic, and reminded me of like previous bands like Circus Lupus and stuff like that. But again, like this was coming from a place of being pretty young, kind of naive, maybe a bit of an edgelord, and never really expecting that this band would really have any lifespan outside of being a Montreal band and playing small time shows like with our friends.
From the point of view of that, of what you say there about sort of being Dadaist and absurdist, I was having this thought today. So I was in the gym and I was listening to one of your albums, and then, which is kind of, it's strange music to listen to here in the gym, but I listened to one of your albums and then that finished and I decided to listen to Pig Destroyer. I don't know if you're familiar with Pig Destroyer, but they're kind of like a grindcore band. And I think they're really good. They have, you know, like a very shocking, kind of gory, disturbing aesthetic. But it's kind of interesting to listen to a band like Pig Destroyer after listening to AIDS Wolf. In a way, like visually and thematically, it's more gruesome and disturbing and horrifying. but in a way, in terms of like the sort of musical lineage, it's easier to hear like constant riffs and sort of like familiar melodies. And so I listened to this album and I thought to myself, I wonder, like, for a person who's not sort of used to abrasive music or one sort of another, I thought, like, what is fundamentally more kind of confronting for them? Like, I understand, you know, you're not making music for people who, like, let's say, are fans of Garth Brooks. But I was kind of wondering to myself, like, do you think fundamentally, just sort of like from a philosophical point of view, like to the sort of mainstream audience, what is kind of fundamentally more disturbing, horror or absurdity?
Uh, that's I don't know.
That's a good question. I think there's more. I mean, I think there's more of a cultural context for horror.
Yeah.
You know, there's a famously named horror movie genre. We have video games that engage with horror, and there's a long lineage of metal bands of different types engaging with these kind of tropes. So even people who might not be fans of metal or of horror movies or horror video games, comics, they might have still a passing familiarity with the imagery or the sounds of it because it's more of a thing. But when you're being aiming for absurdity or data, there is a cultural context, but I'm not trying to say, oh, we were such an original band, but there's less of a playbook because absurdity always involves like deviating from tropes in different ways, and it creates its own sets of tropes. But a lot of the bands that we saw as really like-minded in terms of like approach and compositional interest did not sound or look anything like us. Thinking of our friends Yip Yip, who were based in Orlando, who were more of an electronic music act, but really engaging with this kind of like uneasy composition. You know, we felt a kinship in terms of approach and in terms of interest, but we didn't sound like them, we didn't look like them, and it was similar with a lot of the bands that we really related to and really saw as our peers, that like sonically there could be a lot of difference, presentation wise there could be a lot of difference, but there was this interest in, I guess, like imbuing these interests in, like, you know, the maybe artier sides of rock music with avant-garde, but also with being very playful and trying to like play with the limits of form.
And in terms of that interest in absurdity and the avant-garde that you all share, what were your kind of main inspirations in that area where, you know, whether from a musical point of view or even from a visual point of view? Because I know for Yannick and Chloe, you had your Serapop collaboration that you had on the visual side of things before you had AIDS Wolf. So what kind of got you into the avant-garde, so to speak?
I personally, I mean, I just came about it, I think like everyone, through, you know, punk rock and alternative rock music that just leads you there eventually, one way or another. I think we're all big Captain Beefheart fans. I mean, that would be a fairly important touchstone, and certainly, you know, the gold standard for merging the two worlds of, you know, the avant-garde and just, you know, rock music as a sort of a idiom.
Yeah, and I'd say we're all big Throbbing Gristle fans as well, who were another band who were, you know, coming out of the art milieu, and really playing with form and, well, playing with instrumentation way more than we ever did, but playing with like the idea of like what rock music can be.
Yep.
Yeah,
Okay.
I'm thinking also about like orchestral art music, like I think Chloe and I for a while were really into John Adams early operas and
For a while.
sure. Well, I mean,
I
still,
just
but
showed my students Nixon in China last week.
Schoenberg
I
also,
somewhere
and like with where you can find dissonance there, it was also something really important for us. And I remember like when Miles was in the band, like we were discussing about Messiaen for a while, for a long bit, like and how you played with like arranged melodies and like kind of tonal structures and yeah, and
I
that
think
also like informed like how we were tuning our guitars as well. Yeah,
I think it was before Alex, just right before Alex joined the band, but there was a point where we were all reading The Rest Is Noise
yeah,
by Alex Ross, his history of contemporary
no, that's right when I
composition.
joined the band.
That was
yeah.
when you joined the band. Yeah. So like,
I
there
think somewhere along the line, Chloe and Yannick got really into opera, and that was amazing. And yeah, and that started to come out in the music, which is and that that's the record that we're putting out on SKiN GRAFT. I think is like as close as we got. Like some of it's more representative of these kind of the later era where those things were free jazz. We were listening to it. We started listening to a lot of free jazz in the van. We started playing free jazz at the gigs over the sound system before and after we played. And so these types of things are coming out in the music where they weren't maybe so much anymore. So it just changed the dynamic a little bit.
Yeah, and like
yeah, like we would really go like in the van, we would go from listening to like Alban Berg to listening to Voivod to listening to Six Figure Satellite to listening to Archie Shepp like within like the course of an hour and a half.
yeah, White
Just
Light, White
kind of
Heat got a lot of
White Light, White Heat was a
play.
big one.
Yeah.
what did?
White Light, White Heat.
Oh gosh.
Yeah,
I mean,
I
that's a
mean,
classic, right?
yeah,
Actually,
And
that's another good
again,
example of where, popular musical forms and the avant-garde meet.
yeah.
Most famously in some case, the shrieking, howling violin of John Cale over top of these sort of Lou Reed's almost Tin Pan Alley style songs.
Yeah, a lot of people
I've never heard a shrieking sound that I didn't love.
Yeah, but like our contemporaries also like I think had a big influence on us like
Yeah,
and a lot of those bands that we were playing with like Sightings,
Sightings was a huge
Flight
influence.
Automaton,
Gay Beast.
yeah, definitely Gay Beast,
Beast.
like and like I mean it would be like the Arab on Radar post projects like like we toured with all these bands like Made in Mexico, Chinese Stars, and like those like what those guys did like was like obviously like influenced the band like especially at the beginning, and like we were able to depart from that, so yeah.
So, having brought up the forthcoming release, Harsh Human Sounds on SKiN GRAFT Records, so if if I understand this correctly, you were already playing at least some of these tracks live in 2011 before you went in and recorded them. So,
Yeah,
tell me first of all, what do you remember about those last shows that the band played together? Does anything particularly stand out from those shows?
Not really. Not to say that they weren't. They were all. This band played a lot, and so they kind of all become a blur. The ones that stand out are unfortunately the ones that were bad, as
yeah.
opposed to the ones where you're like, hey, that was a fun night, saw a bunch of great bands, played a good set, was in bed relatively early despite it all. Those don't stick. Whereas it's like, yeah, that was insane. Who are these people? How are we going to get paid? This amp blew up on us. Those are the ones that you remember. I mean, I remember the last one because it was the last one. But
Yeah, I mean the last two shows, you know, in Montreal and Toronto, Toronto was basically our second hometown because we played there so often and we were friends with so many bands there.
yeah.
I mean, they were total madness. Like they were really just super fun, well-attended shows. But right before that, we had been invited at Artist Run Center in Sherbrooke, Quebec. In Canada, you have this network called Artist Run Centers that are these not-profit art venues that mostly show visual and media art. But we got invited as part of a music program, and it was a strange setup because we were on residence making work there, but we were playing in a separate building from the
parking garage. We were
playing in a parking garage. And they had set up some kind of surround sound speaker system.
They had created a miniature version of that room.
Yeah.
Yes. Like
it was
that,
like a diorama of the parking garage in the art gallery, and we're across the street playing, and they're broadcasting us into this little matchbook style diorama.
So it was a concert without our bodies in the room.
Yeah.
And it was really strange.
That's interesting because I have a feeling reading about Throbbing Gristle, they had at least one performance where they kind of did that on purpose, where it was in some large warehouse maybe where they were living, and somehow they were playing in a place that the audience couldn't see them. And they were doing it, you know, out of whatever curiosity to see what that experience was like for the audience. But I guess you were just coincidentally thrust into that environment.
I mean, this was the idea of there were some guys. These guys are really interesting. They were
airplane sound designers.
But they also worked for one of the big, probably Bombardier, one of the big,
Bombardier. Yeah, they were designing like the acoustics of airplanes.
Yeah, so they're making sure that the airplane is soundproof, essentially. So you're not, you know, blowing out your ears on your 7-hour flight, listening to jumbo jet engines really loudly.
But yeah, we were just one of the many bands that got brought into that residency / performance situation, and most of the other bands, you know, it was mostly bands from Montreal and Quebec City who had like more of a kind of indie sensibility than us. So there was really, you know, but there was no overlap. Like when we were there, it was just us. I think we spent a week in the parking garage playing before the show.
It was 3 days, I think.
Oh, 3 days. Yeah. Anyways, so that was like one of our last ever shows.
Yeah.
Which was and really, like, it was very strange but very interesting, and it was kind of like, oh, too bad playing DIY music doesn't bring you into this kind of context.
Yeah, and I mean, we played a record launch for the Ma Vie Banale Avant-garde record at the Montreal Museum of Contemporary Art, and I mean, that was just a performance, as a normal performance, because Yannick and Chloë were in the biennial show, but you know, it felt like there could be interesting futures there. And honestly, I think that, you know, what Chloë and Yannick's contemporary work now is, you can kind of see that it, with you guys, that sort of feels like it went that way. Because, you know, you still work with music, for sure. It's not rock music. It's, but it's certainly like you guys are now bringing music to contemporary art, which is great.
And I do want to get to talking about harsh human style specifically, but as we're sort of going down a slightly different road, I am curious when I talk to people, particularly for this podcast, one of the things I'm really, like, the main thing that I'm really exploring is I want to understand, like, the practicalities of the DIY music world and all of the different things that people have to face. So, you know, a lot of this is kind of financial, and I understand that a lot of people in underground or DIY independent artistic circles are not necessarily making art because they go, oh, I want to make money or I expect to make money out of this. But as in the world in general, money is floating around. And, you know, you alluded to before playing shows, and you might have certain places where you play and you're like, how are we going to get paid? It's like you want to tour, you want to get from one place to another. You might not expect to get rich. I'm sure you don't expect to get rich playing noisy music, but you hope that you're going to get paid enough that it sustains you to be able to go from one place to another. So, you know, from that kind of, from the point of view now of what Alex was just talking about with what you're doing now, what you're doing artistically, are you now in a realm where there's more kind of like obvious ways that you can get some kind of financial remuneration out of it than in the DIY sort of rock adjacent world that you were in before?
I would say, especially like since Chloe and I kind of like concentrated on doing contemporary art, there's more of a kind of well, at least in Canada, there's a kind of a structure that like regulates how much artists are paid for, you know, having exhibitions. So in a way, it's a little bit more predictable once you kind of like get exhibited around and like and there's a network of artists that supports that because that's another thing. It's like it's artists run. So like, you know, it's like peer to peer, like, you know, when there's juries and when there's programmation and it's across the country done in those places, in those small galleries, it's done by other artists. And like everybody try to, you know, as much as possible support each other in their endeavors. And so since those fees are set and a lot of it is supported from, you know, government subsidies to the arts, for us, it was kind of a big step up in
Yeah, like
like yeah, in living conditions, like because we were like, oh, we can actually do something creative and like, you know, actually like have a, you know, baseline living from it so that that was a good change. But like with the band, we were managing a tight ship and we never lost money. But because also when we started AIDS Wolf, we already had a pretty solid network, you know, of other musicians, at least in Eastern Canada, that we could
well, in like New
exchange with.
England.
Yeah. And like so we had like a small touring network and we knew we could get paid for shows. We knew we could get good attendances at those shows. And because we had two bands uh, before AIDS Wolf, you know, that like allowed us to build on and maintain those relationships.
But
So,
like
but like it was not a, you know, that's what we had Siri Pop running at the same time. It's just we couldn't live from it though. That's the thing. It was sustaining itself. It was
yeah,
being its practice space.
In DIY to this day, nothing
Yeah.
is standardized. Uh, you know, as fun as it is, the work of musicians is devalued.
Yeah.
You're never like there's across the board in music, and I don't know why music has never figured this out, going back to the fucking Middle Ages, but there's this complete misunderstanding about what it takes to get a group of musicians on a stage and playing music, no matter what style. People just think it happens.
Yeah, there's no security, there's no baseline to work from.
And Canada supports its artists, and there's historical reasons for this that we won't go into, but you know, Canada's challenging because of distance between
geography.
places. You know, we talked about
Yeah.
going to Toronto all the time. That's a 6-hour drive, 5 if you rip it, you know, but that's like the next big city. Ottawa's 2 hours away. Ottawa's the capital, but it's dead. It's culturally dead, and it's not a very big city.
Alex and I are both from Ottawa and we left. And everyone we know from there left.
And then this massive market to the south is separated by an insane border. And it's very expensive. And I mean, AIDS Wolf, we're very lucky that we were able to support ourselves with, in order to, we were able to afford to pay for work permits to go down there and play. But not everyone is, because it's very expensive. And you have to be on top of things. You have to have your tour contracts signed and submitted months ahead of time of your tour to get the visa. So it's really tough. And the context of Canada is like important. It's not made easy, largely because of geography, but also because of an inbred conservative sort of nature in Canadians, and even in wild and woolly Montreal, it's hard. And then, of course, there's just finding. Ace Wolf was always very lucky because Chloë and Yannick had a screen printing studio, which had a room in it. So getting a place for the band to rehearse where we could be very loud was not a problem. But that's a huge part of DIY. Supporting your band has to work enough to pay for the rent, and there's increasingly less and less of these places. So it's not easy. DIY is not easy.
Yeah, like
we did pretty well considering, I would say.
No one's gonna get rich doing strange installation art, the kind of work that Yannick and I do. Artists before we were born set up a network and like a system for non-commercial visual and media art that, you know, the artist always gets paid a certain amount to exhibit at these nonprofit spaces. And the nonprofit spaces, when you're out of town, they'll often pay for your flights, put you up in a hotel. And, you know, there's nothing comparable. I mean, also in Canada, the grant system for visual art, for media art, for theater is one thing. But as soon as you're doing music that touches on rock, then the granting system for that is all about commercial viability. So like if we had been doing like purely art music, if we'd been doing like compositional stuff, if we'd been doing jazz, we could have potentially been eligible for arts funding. But because we were doing avant-garde rock music, well, the machinery that funds rock music in Canada is about, well, have you already sold this many units? Are you on a label that's selling this many units? Are you playing on radio? Are you playing on television? So it's when you're in this kind of like space, you're really like, you know, just dependent on the door or like small guarantees. And it's really, I mean, I imagine in the UK, it's, I mean, we've toured there, so it's similar. It's bar culture, it's warehouse party culture, maybe it's basement party culture, but it's always around this idea of selling alcohol usually.
Yeah, the working conditions are terrible.
They're terrible. I mean, if you're
lucky, it's not a joke, and that's something that's like even the case, you know, the higher you go up in the levels of success in music, it's the working conditions remain pretty terrible. You know, even if you're a very successful band, you're still like in a shitty bar, often in basements, and like a healthy meal is considered chips and hummus. You know, that's your vegetarian meal. You know, it's really bad, you know. And then you're on the floor every night, which when you're, you know, doing DIY like us, which actually I'm quite comfortable sleeping on the floor. But
we've stayed, like, you know, to go back to horror imagery, we've stayed at places that could have been the setting of a horror movie.
Yeah.
We've stayed at places where like you're just waiting for the camera to pan over to the you know, flesh suit or the serial killer or whatever, like places that had like blood on the wall and like wall, like
mattresses in the windows, no windows, stray dogs coming in,
dog shit inside. Like
yeah, I mean, yeah.
And like you don't know what the conditions are until you get there.
Yeah.
And you get there and it's like maybe it's like 3 a.m. and you've just loaded everything and you're exhausted and you don't have the money to go stay in a motel. Like you're just like, well, I don't catch any kind of parasites sleeping.
Also just a lot of the in retrospect, the amount of time you spend not really doing anything is really challenging.
You mean
nothing
like
worse than getting to a bar in a strip mall and then you're like waiting for a guy to show up to do the sound. You do the sound and then you're waiting for a guy to show up to tell you how many drinks you can have, and then you're waiting for an audience to show up in this basically this absolutely nothing space. You know, there's nothing that distinguishes it from the space that you would be in the suburbs of the town before. There's nothing to look at on the walls. There's like a TV playing whatever random shit.
And like pre-smartphone era too.
Yeah.
Where you don't
Yeah.
have this kind of distraction machine.
But
So
also
you-
where you don't have a
I'm
machine
glad
where
I
you
didn't
can
have a
just
cell phone at the
leave
time. You know?
and then people contact you when they need you. Like when
Yeah.
you just, yeah.
And like, you know, it's like, oh yeah, you can bring books, but then like it's just you're still holding the half, you know, like like the half sleep that you had the night before. And
Yeah.
if you do anything that's kind of like focused, you can just fall asleep again.
Yeah, and you're there. You can't really relax. You're there to perform. You're there to work. You know?
And like the only rush of adrenaline comes when you get to play, and like which is the kind of the nice bit, but then it lasts like an hour.
Not even.
Yeah.
Yeah, I think our longest sets were like 45 minutes.
Yeah, something like that. To an hour, Dion. Yeah.
I want to follow up on this topic, but I also don't want to go by without actually asking you about Harsh Human Style. So in terms of going into that recording session,
Yeah.
how much of a clear picture did you have in terms of what you wanted to get out of that session?
I mean, Sébastien, who recorded us, had been doing our live sound in Montreal for 3 years at that point. And he had been wanting to record us because he wanted to test his recording setup. He was like having a studio at this basically arts loft that was mostly like practice space for bands and like an illegal venue that was called La Brique. And like as we were wrapping up with the band, we're like, oh, might as well. Like, you know, we had 4 songs left that hadn't been recorded.
That was the
for
mission
Bad Ad.
primarily.
Yeah.
Was just
And
document
we're like, we'll
those
just
songs.
put them down, you know, record them and like just for prosperity. And we had the intention to maybe release them, but we weren't really like, you know, really putting like the effort at that point because we're like kind of minding onto other things and
Kind
like,
of burnt out.
Yeah, burnt out too.
Absolutely.
And like there was technical difficulties. Like post recording, the recording went fine. Like Alex was reminding us the other day. Like I think it was an afternoon.
Was
And
we had
it's super
rehearsed
easy.
so
Yeah.
much at that point and we'd recorded so much at that point that it felt very easy and very natural. And
Yeah.
like Yannick said, because we had Seb doing our live sound, it was like, yeah, we're showing up, we're playing our songs, our buddies there. You know, the like level of like like it just felt very natural, very low pressure, very like we're getting something done, we're putting these songs down. It's super chill. Yeah,
it was nice. It was the summer too. Like the weather was good, and I don't know. And like actually, like at that point, because we had taken the decision to end the band, like it felt good, kind of like just, you know, document these last songs and just kind of like move on. And yeah, but like then the mixing was a little bit difficult because there were the technical problems that basically delayed the recording being put out for 13 years is is related to the mixing sessions. And yeah, stems got mixed and then lost, and then like we only had those rough mix to work from, and just were able to get around like finalizing the mix this year.
Yeah, and there, for me personally, there's a bunch of times when I was like, "Hey, Yannick, what do you think about this stuff?" And Yannick said, "Well, I don't have capacity right now. Do you want to give it a shot?" And I would listen to the files, and I'd just be like, "Oh, I can't do this. I can't mix this right now." It took a solid decade for me to be like, "Oh yeah, I think my brain can handle mixing this music," you know.
Because the sound
it's
source
tough.
was really good. That's the thing.
Yeah.
But like the things were really uneven, so that had to be controlled a bit. Yeah.
Mixing is really hard.
Yeah. Especially when
actually
you're
do that.
working from a stereo rough mix.
like
Yeah.
I think we were like one of the first bands that Seb had actually recorded in that space.
Yeah.
he was still really feeling out like the room and his setup and
Well, he had to sync to Pro Tools engines that were different makes, I think. And that's where the difficulty came. Like, it's because things weren't syncing right, or like things ended up not patching properly. But like the thing is, he did an excellent job at like doing the miking, and that's how we were able to finally, once we had the technology to figure it out, to like output the recording as it needed to be.
In a way, it sounds like through that process, you were still kind of committed the whole way through, like this is going to get done eventually. Is that true?
Yeah. Yeah, we're just not
Yeah,
rushing
I think
it.
inevitably.
And how does it feel now it's actually coming out? Like, is there a further sense of closure to this, or had you already achieved that just from the actual recording itself?
I was, for me, speaking for me personally, I was really stoked when Yannick and I started zeroing in on like, okay, it's achievable. There's just like some small tweaks here and there. And I was listening to it a lot and enjoying the music again for purely just, enjoyment's sake. And so that was really nice. But now it's, I don't know. I'll get a CD from Mark and put it on, and that'll be fun.
Yeah, I mean it feels good, like it, but in a way, yeah, I wasn't. I mean, I was at least at the time I was hoping it would come out, but then I'd kind of forgotten a little bit about it. And since like Chloe and I had other things running, like it would have been okay if it didn't come out at all, because like we knew, we had like ourselves a document of it, and we were fine with that. But we're happy it's like being like released and that Mark was into it. And like that definitely feels good. I mean, Chloe and I, like, I think up until the pandemic, like between the band ending and the pandemic, we hadn't really touched on AIDS Wolf stuff. And like when the pandemic hit, we kind of revisited the tracks, and like we're like, oh yeah. We're actually feeling pretty proud about like what we did like throughout the kind of 9 years that the band existed.
I have really weird experiences with it sometimes. I really, there's stuff on Ma Vie Banale, Avant-garde that I don't remember, and I feel like I'm listening to another person's music, which is really crazy. Sometimes I'm really surprised. I found, when I still had a car, so this would have been pre-pandemic, I found like a loose copy of the March to the Sea CD floating around somewhere in the bottom of the box. And I was like, oh, I put this on, and I was like, man, this is amazing. I don't remember a lot of this music, and it just sounds really good,
yeah,
It's great to have distance from it,
it is. It's nice. Like I think I was probably the least fussed out of the three of us about having this ever come out, because I felt like in a lot of ways I really had to separate myself from the bands to kind of move forward with other things. As much as I feel that we ended on a creative high note and on good terms as collaborators and friends, and that the last shows were like the best last shows that a band could ask for. Like they were really well attended. We had a great, we played with bands that we were good friends with, that we really respected. It was a great time, but revisiting the material also like revisits the like bad times and the bad memories and the like absolutely brutal critiques that we had. And I feel like until we started discussing like putting this out, I felt like I think I had like really internalized the like the really negative criticisms we received over the years. And it was like almost surprising to revisit the material and be like, oh yeah, this is good. Like we didn't suck. Like I thought we had sucked, but this is actually really awesome. And so it feels nice to have it you know, to be able to listen to the tracks with all these years of distance and like see the like amazing cover art that Yannick did and be like, oh yeah, like we actually were a good band, and it's nice to like remember that we were ultimately making this kind of music for ourselves.
Mm-hmm. I think too now it comes out in a different, when this music is released, there's not a lot of, the context of the time was so different. Montreal was different. Montreal was a very hip town at that time, and in a lot of ways, there's a lot of attention in the media about music in Montreal, and a lot of people mistook AIDS Wolf for something that it really wasn't, you know, like, and that context is gone now, so that helps.
Yeah, it really seems like in the time when we were getting a lot of press, it seemed like people were really angry that we weren't the Arcade Fire.
Or
it's like,
yeah,
what
or
about
just
this
assumed
led
we
you
were
to think that we were
a bunch
going
of
to be
coked
that?
out kids from the, you know, party scene, which was huge here. Still, that is still here. But anyway, I'm gonna have to go because I'm at work.
Totally. I didn't want to keep you longer. I know I said I was going to have you for an hour. So, Alex, thank you so much for your time. And I'm sorry for technical difficulties.
Nice to meet
We're going to
you.
make it work somehow, but it was great to meet you.
Yeah, thanks for the questions. And Yannick, we'll talk soon.
Yeah.
Take care.
Bye.
Yeah, I wasn't going to keep you two for much longer either, but I did want to ask you, and perhaps you can speak for Alex as well, seeing as you are still close, in terms of what you're doing now, you know, other artistic ventures, projects. I got the sense, or there was a mention, Chloe, of you teaching as well. So what's happening in your creative worlds these days?
Well, I'll speak for Alex, who's still having his solo project, Drainolith, and just put out a record recently. And it's
An amazing record.
I mean, the whole output of Drainolith has been pretty solid, and he had like really good players playing with him on tour. I mean, he toured the UK fairly recently.
In the summer.
In the summer, yeah.
Yeah.
With like members of Gutter Snipes and other people, I forget. But yeah,
it's
very
Sydney
good
and Gretchen playing as his backing band.
And yeah, so I think that's going fine. Otherwise, like he works at the CKUT, which is like the community radio station in Montreal that's affiliated with McGill University, and is also participating like in a lot of the kind of more underground noisy music scene in Montreal. And so and the both of us have moved to Edmonton because I got a tenure track position at the University of Alberta, and so we're both teaching. Yeah, in different capacities. Chloe is also, doing some teaching at Concordia University of Montreal, online, and at U of A as well.
In addition to Yannick being an assistant professor at U of A, we're also currently working on our PhDs as a collaborative at Concordia University back in Montreal. So I sometimes teach part-time with Concordia, and I sometimes teach part-time at U of A.
Yeah.
But in the context of visual arts.
Yeah, well, that's it. This kind of help us kind of like sustain and diffuse our art practice, which is the main thing, basically.
Yeah, we got the like more professional jobs in order to fund our art practice, which kind of keeps sprawling out and getting more expensive every year because we're working with performers and doing a lot of video work that ends up being scripted and scored, and doing a lot of like live performance work, sometimes for stage, sometimes for gallery. But we like still have our ambitions to do these weird sprawling projects, and the more people we involve in them, the more it ends up costing us. So yeah, that's how we ended up moving out to Alberta to have jobs.
And how do you feel being part of academia?
I don't know. We were always kind of adjacent to it. We always had friends who were part of it. It doesn't feel strange to us. And like, I mean, when AIDS Wolf ended was partly to allow Chloe and I to go back to school and finish our degrees, which we had stopped in order to have touring bands back in like 2001. So, but like no, we were always in dialogue with people in academia in one way or another. I mean, especially visual arts is always has always strong ties to it.
I mean,
And
visual when you're in art academia, like in like art practice academia, it doesn't really feel like academia. It
no,
really feels like you're getting paid to like fuck around and teach students how to fuck around.
yeah, I mean, there's the paperwork that you have to do
Well,
too, but I
yeah,
mean, that's
there's
also part of the art life. So
the more administrative level,
yeah,
sure, but like the actual like research practice based stuff, it feels very different from like our colleagues who are like in more like humanities. It feels like we can still do stuff that's very instinctual, that's very playful, that's very strange. Um and it has this context, but it still feels like kind of punk rock.
I can understand that. To finish off, drawing things back into a specifically AIDS Wolf related question. So going back to I think I brought them up in this interview, but the 9 principles of AIDS Wolf. So the last principle was become the weird punks. So I'm wondering from your point of view, when you look around at the rock or the avant-garde musical environment today, who are the weird punks or who embody that spirit in from your point of view?
well, Gretchen for sure.
Like Ava Mendoza.
Yeah, yeah, absolutely. I mean, Weasel still at it. Weasel Walter, like, uh, and like even like our colleagues who are not in music anymore, we still have ties to it. I'm thinking of Dan from Gay Beast,
Daniel Ludke,
yeah, it was
who's
like,
also now in art academia. He's
yeah,
teaching at Florida State.
in Tallahassee, and but like he's also, I think he carries on this kind of punk spirit into his art making,
Like an
and
avant-garde punk spirit.
yeah,
But like even like, someone like Raven Chacon, who like
yeah,
we met through playing, who was like in the noise scene and is now this like celebrated composer with a Pulitzer Prize under his belt. Um, Still, I feel like, we saw a concert of his work back in the fall, and I feel that like what he's doing still kind of embodies a lot of this absurdity of the like kind of merging of, I mean, even if he was more of a noise guy than a rock guy, like this absurdity that we're interested in, that we gravitate
yeah,
towards.
and then the people we collaborated with, like I'm thinking of Pat and Steve from Athletic Automaton, who have a band now again in Providence. So that's
What's
you
their
know
band
uh,
called?
I forget, but yeah, they have a brand new band, new people also in the band, but I think it's a 4-piece. But yeah, and it's 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 really nice to keep in touch with these people and see their endeavors or creative endeavors transform in time, but that they keep this kind of like spirit or this kind of curiosity and kind of like looking for new things or kind of like pushing ideas and get into new like undiscovered territories. And really that's kind of what we want to do with Azolf as well. I mean, kind of transcend our influences and kind of push them further.
Well, like I was listening to the collaborative record that Wolf Eyes did with Anthony Braxton the other day, and it was just such a joyful experience because we're really good friends with the Wolf Eyes guys, and just like this merging of like, between generations, between genres, and how like natural it sounds, how almost spiritual it sounds, is just like, yeah, there's like people who are devoted to doing really challenging but beautiful things in music, and that's exciting. And I don't know, like, even being in a new, much smaller city, we're getting to know the like community of people in avant-garde music, and seeing a lot of shows here, and just kind of remembering that like a lot of the like best people that we know are through playing this kind of music. So it's not all just like bad working conditions. It's like truly, truly brilliant people who are trying to kind of push things creatively, aesthetically, without any care in the world towards, is this going to build an audience? Is this going to make money? Is this like really doing it for the art of it? And that's really exciting.
Yeah, what unites us is not just the trauma. It's also, yeah, the aesthetics. Yeah.
Yeah. Well, look, Chloe and Yannick, thank you so much for your time. I'm really happy that I managed to get all three of you together, and I really appreciate your time and your insights. And yeah, I'm definitely someone who appreciates the weird and the avant-garde and the noisy and the absurd and the unusual and the creative. So I'm a great admirer, and I'm appreciative of the mark that you've left in the artistic world. So thank you.
Well, thanks. Yeah, thanks for the interview. It was great to talk.
Yeah, thank you for your time and your interest in our work.
My pleasure. And yeah, until our paths cross in the future, all the best.
All right,
Absolutely.
take care.